Disclaimer: this story contains mature themes intended for adult viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. I didn't hear the door creak open, just the soft shift of air behind me. I had leaned down to pick up the small piece of laundry I dropped after my shower, still wrapped in a loose towel, steam drifting from the bathroom into my bedroom. And then, a quiet, startled inhale. I froze. When I turned my head, he was standing in the doorway, eyes wide, breath caught, already trying to step back out the way he came. His hand fumbled for the doorknob, but the moment our eyes met, everything stopped. The room felt warmer. My heartbeat kicked up fast, loud enough that I wondered if he could hear it too. "Wait," I whispered, soft, but enough to make him stop retreating. He looked at me like he wasn't sure whether to apologize or run. His gaze kept flicking away, toward the floor, the wall, anywhere but me, yet somehow kept circling back, caught between panic and something he couldn't hide. I stood up slowly. Too slowly. The towel loosened with the movement, slipping lower against my skin. He swallowed hard, jaw tense, like he was forcing himself not to react. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to walk in," he said, voice unsteady. "I know," I replied, stepping just a little closer, close enough to sense the warmth radiating off him, close enough that the air between us changed. "But you're still standing there." His breath hitched. For a second, neither of us moved. The room felt charged, like the slightest shift could tip everything over the edge. A silence that wasn't uncomfortable, just full. Heavy. Electric. And then the towel slipped just a little more. His eyes lifted to mine, finally meeting, finally holding, and I felt that spark, the kind that makes your stomach tighten and your pulse jump. I let the towel fall from my fingers, just enough to let him know I wasn't embarrassed. Maybe even curious. His reaction, his stillness, the way his chest rose sharply, told me he was, too. But before anything could happen, before he could step closer, or speak, or decide whether to stay, a sudden noise echoed from down the hallway. We both whipped our heads toward the sound, and everything changed in an instant. And that's where everything began. But what happened next, that's the part you'll want to see. The sound in the hallway faded, but the tension it left behind settled between us like a secret neither of us was ready to acknowledge. He stepped back, clearing his throat, trying to regain the control he clearly lost the moment our eyes met. I tightened my towel again, just enough to make the moment feel normal, even though everything inside me felt anything but. He murmured, "I'll just give you space," before slipping out of the doorway, but his voice held something more complicated. Worry. Curiosity. Guilt. And something he wasn't ready to admit. I stood there alone, breathing slowly, my heartbeat still unsteady. It wasn't the first time something like this had happened, small accidents, close calls, moments that felt too charged to be dismissed. But this was the first time it felt undeniable. The truth was, things at home had been different for months. The house felt quieter. Colder. Conversations with my partner had grown shorter, thinner, strained by work, stress, and a kind of emotional distance that creeps in unnoticed until it's suddenly everywhere. We still shared a home, but the warmth we once had faded under daily routine and unspoken frustrations. And he, the one who just walked in, had become the unexpected presence who filled the silence. He wasn't supposed to. I wasn't supposed to let him. But life rarely followed the rules we drew for ourselves. It started small. Passing each other in the kitchen. Late-night talks in the living room when neither of us could sleep. The way he'd ask if I'd eaten, or offer to help with something I was struggling to lift. The way he lingered just a second longer than necessary when handing me a mug, his fingers brushing mine. I told myself those moments meant nothing. He was young. Too young. And I was committed, even if that commitment felt increasingly one-sided. But then there were times I caught him looking at me the way no one had in a long time, like he actually saw me. Not the mother figure. Not the house caretaker. Not the woman fading into routine. Just me. And I would look away too quickly, pretending not to notice how warm it made me feel. Today broke something open. Because when he accidentally walked in, his reaction wasn't childish embarrassment. It was shock. Want. Restraint. And guilt layered over all of it, like he was fighting something he didn't trust himself to feel. After a while, I stepped out of my room, towel replaced with soft loungewear, hair still damp. I found him in the living room, pretending to scroll his phone but not actually reading anything. He didn't look up at first. When he finally did, our eyes met in that same quiet, electric way, an unspoken question hanging in the space between us. Neither of us answered it. Not yet. But the air was different now, and we both knew it. And this was only the beginning. The days that followed felt different, like something in the air had shifted, charged and fragile at the same time. We moved around each other carefully, but every interaction now carried a weight neither of us dared to name. He became quieter, but more watchful. I noticed it first in the kitchen. I was reaching up to grab a bowl from the top shelf when I felt him behind me, close, but not touching. His presence warmed the space just enough to make the tiny hairs on my arms rise. When I turned, he stepped back too fast, pretending to check something on the counter. "You need help?" he asked, voice calm but his eyes betraying something sharper. "No," I said softly, though my heartbeat said otherwise. "I've got it." He nodded, but his gaze lingered a second longer, too long. When he finally looked away, I could almost feel the tension pull like an invisible thread between us. Later that night, temptation took another shape. A friend of his came over, someone closer to his age, loud, flirtatious, overly comfortable. I was in the living room when she leaned in too close to him, laughing at something he said, touching his arm with an ease that felt intentional. I shouldn't have cared. I had no claim. But the tightness in my chest told a different story. He noticed. His eyes flicked toward me, not casually, not accidentally, but searching. And when he saw the tiny shift in my expression, his own smile faded, replaced with something darker, more intense. Jealousy, not mine. His. He excused himself quickly, walking past his friend and toward the hallway. I followed a moment later, unsure why. Maybe I needed to breathe. Maybe I needed answers. Maybe I just needed to know if he felt what I felt. He was standing halfway down the hall, hands in his pockets, shoulders tense. "You okay?" I asked. He turned slightly, not fully. I didn't like how she acted. "She's your age," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "So," he shot back, quietly but firmly. "That doesn't mean anything." There it was, raw, unguarded, impossible to ignore. We stood there, the house silent around us, the hallway dim except for the soft light spilling from my room. For a moment, neither of us moved. His jealousy fed my longing fed his restraint. It felt forbidden, undeniable, on the edge of something we both knew we shouldn't want but couldn't push away. He took one small step toward me. Just one. But it was enough to make my breath catch, and enough to make everything feel dangerously close to breaking. And the night wasn't over yet. The house was unusually quiet that night, too quiet, the kind that makes every breath feel louder, every heartbeat more noticeable. A power outage had knocked out half the lights, leaving the home wrapped in shadows and soft pockets of warm glow from a few battery lamps we had set out. I was in the living room, trying to read, trying to pretend my thoughts weren't tangled around what had happened in the hallway earlier. But every sound made me look up. Every shift of air made me wonder if he was near. When he finally appeared from the dark hallway, the book slipped slightly in my hands. "You're still awake?" he asked, voice low, almost careful. "So are you," I answered. He hesitated just a moment, before stepping closer, the soft lamplight catching the edges of his face. His expression was mixed, unsure, hopeful, restless. The same look he'd been giving me for days. But tonight, it felt bolder. He sat down beside me on the couch, not far enough. Not as far as he used to. His knee brushed mine lightly, accidental, maybe. But the way he didn't move it away told me it wasn't an accident at all. The power flickered again, and the room dipped even darker. Without thinking, I reached out to steady myself, my fingers landing on his arm. Warm. Firm. Too close. His breath caught, quiet but unmistakable. "You okay?" he whispered, eyes dropping to where my hand rested on him. I tried to pull away, but he gently caught my fingers, not holding me, just keeping me there. A silent question. A silent admission. In that dim, quiet room, the air felt too thick to breathe. "We shouldn't," I started, voice barely above a breath. "I know," he whispered back. "But I can't seem to stay away from you." Those words settled into me like heat spreading under my skin. Dangerous. Tender. Real. He shifted closer, just a fraction. His shoulder brushed mine. His voice lowered, softer than the dark around us. "Tell me to leave, and I will." I looked at him, really looked. The storm of restraint in his eyes. The longing he wasn't trying to hide anymore. The unspoken truth we'd been circling for days. My lips parted, but no words came out. And then, a loud knock rattled the front door, echoing through the quiet house. We both jerked toward the sound. He stood up fast. I rose too. We stared at the door, frozen. Neither of us knew what waited on the other side. But whatever it was about to change everything. The knock at the door echoed again, louder this time, sharper, like whoever was on the other side wasn't willing to wait. We both froze. The living room felt suddenly colder, the warm lamplight no longer enough to soften the tension pulsing between us. He moved first, stepping toward the door with cautious, measured steps. I followed, my heart pounding, not just from fear of whoever was outside, but from the unfinished moment hanging thick between us. He glanced back at me once, silently asking if he should open it. I nodded. He pulled the door open just an inch, then froze completely. Standing outside was my partner. Back early. Unexpected. And with an expression that said he already sensed something was wrong. He stepped inside without waiting to be invited. His eyes flicked from me, to the dimly lit room, to the young man standing inches away. Not close enough to be suspicious on its own, but close enough that the tension in the air felt unmistakable. "What's going on?" he asked, voice low and steady, but his jaw clenched hard. He wasn't angry yet, just alert, analyzing, connecting dots he hadn't wanted to see before now. I swallowed. The power went out. "We were just talking," he finished for me, but his tone cut sharper than the word itself. The young man stiffened. "Nothing happened," he said quickly, but there was a tremor in his voice he couldn't hide. A tremor that said something could have. My partner looked at him, really looked, and something in his face changed. Suspicion. Hurt. The beginning of betrayal. "You've been spending a lot of time around her lately," he said quietly. "More than you should." "That's not," the young man started, but my partner stepped closer, cutting him off. "You think I haven't noticed?" The words were soft, dangerously soft. The looks, the excuses to be near her, the way she suddenly avoids my eyes. I felt my breath catch. Not because he was accusing, but because he wasn't wrong. Something had been growing between us, something neither of us had admitted until tonight. But then, the twist neither of us saw coming. My partner exhaled shakily, and for the first time in months, his voice cracked. "I thought it was my fault," he whispered. "I thought I was losing her because I wasn't enough." The room went still. The young man dropped his gaze, guilt washing over him. I felt the weight of truth settle in my chest, the emotional distance, the late nights, the quiet drifting apart. He had noticed all of it. And instead of confronting it, he had carried it alone, assuming he was the problem. "I came home early because I wanted to fix things," he said, voice rough with vulnerability. "I didn't expect to walk into this." His eyes glimmered, not with anger, but with something more painful. Fear. The fear of losing me. The fear that he already had. The young man took a step back, torn, conflicted, guilt-heavy in every line of his face. For the first time, he wasn't driven by longing, he was driven by the realization that he might ruin something he never meant to break. "I'm sorry," he whispered, voice barely audible. "I never meant to cross a line." But the look he gave me, filled with unspoken truth, said he already had. The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. One truth had been confessed, but the real choice, the real breaking point, hung suspended in the space between the three of us. And the night was far from over. The silence that followed felt endless, three people standing in the same room, but all of us carried different storms inside. My partner's breathing was unsteady, the young man's guilt was written across every line of his face, and I stood between them, feeling the weight of every unspoken moment that had led us here. Finally, my partner broke the silence. "Tell me the truth," he said, voice low but trembling. "Is there something going on between you two?" The young man looked at me first, seeking permission, guidance, anything, but I couldn't speak. I didn't know what the truth even meant anymore. We hadn't crossed a line physically, but emotionally, the line had blurred weeks ago. He swallowed and faced him. "Nothing happened," he said honestly. "But something's been building. I should have backed away sooner." My partner shut his eyes, the admission hitting him harder than anger ever could. When he opened them again, vulnerability replaced rage, a raw, wounded transparency he rarely showed. "So it's true," he whispered. "I was losing her, and I just watched it happen." "No," I said, finally finding my voice. "You didn't lose me. Not because of him. Because we stopped talking. Because we let distance make decisions for us." He looked at me, eyes glistening. "I thought you didn't want me anymore." Something in me cracked. I did. I do. But I felt alone. And he noticed when you didn't. The words were painful. But necessary. My partner ran a hand through his hair, pacing in a tight circle. He wasn't angry at the young man, he was angry at the silence we'd both let grow between us. And in a strange way, that realization eased some of the guilt constricting my chest. The young man stepped forward, not close, but enough to show sincerity. "I never wanted to come between you. I care about her, maybe more than I should. But I don't want to hurt her, or you." My partner stopped pacing. "So what happens now?" The question hung heavy in the air. I took a breath, steady and deliberate. "We talk. We face what we've ignored. We fix what broke between us, before anything else breaks." My partner nodded slowly, like part of him wanted to believe healing was still possible. "And him?" he asked quietly, glancing at the young man. I turned to him. His eyes held conflict, longing, restraint, sadness, but also understanding. Whatever happened next, he wouldn't fight it. He wouldn't push. "I'll give you both space," he said, voice soft. "I need space too." He stepped back. Turned toward the hallway. Paused. But if you ever need to talk, he added gently, I'm not disappearing. The sincerity in his voice hit me harder than anything else. He wasn't walking away out of defeat, he was walking away out of respect. For me. For what I had to choose. My partner exhaled deeply, shoulders slowly loosening as the storm finally began to settle. We weren't healed. We weren't fixed. But for the first time in months, we were honest. And honesty was the first step. The conflict wasn't over, but the path toward resolution had finally begun. And somewhere in the shadows of the house, the young man paused one last time, looking back at me with a lingering emotion that promised the story wasn't finished. Not yet. The night slowly settled after the storm of emotions. The house was quiet again, but this time, the silence didn't feel heavy, it felt necessary. Healing always begins in quiet spaces. My partner sat on the couch, hands clasped together, staring at the soft lantern light casting shadows across the room. I sat beside him, not too close, not too far, just close enough to show I was still there, still willing. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he exhaled softly. I don't want to lose you, he whispered. Even after everything. I still want us. Something inside me loosened, like a knot I'd carried so long I'd forgotten what it felt like to breathe normally. I want us too, I said gently. But we can't go back to pretending. We have to rebuild. Honestly. Slowly. He nodded, finally meeting my eyes. And for the first time in months, that look wasn't distant or distracted, it was full, warm, familiar. His hand brushed mine, a tentative gesture, a question rather than a claim. I answered by interlocking my fingers with his. A small moment. But a deeply important one. Outside in the hallway, I heard soft footsteps. The young man was leaving the house, quietly, respectfully. Before he reached the door, he paused, leaning lightly against the wall. I stood, giving my partner's hand a squeeze before stepping to the hallway entrance. He looked up when he sensed me there. I'm not upset, he said softly. You chose what you needed. And that's okay. I swallowed, touched by his sincerity. You didn't ruin anything, I told him. If anything, you helped me see what I'd been missing. He smiled a small, genuine, tinged with bittersweet acceptance. You deserve someone who shows up for you. I hope he does. Then, after a quiet moment, he turned and stepped out into the night, letting the door close behind him like a gentle punctuation mark on one of the most complicated chapters of my life. I returned to the living room where my partner waited. When he saw me choose to come back, something in him softened. I'm here, I said simply. He stood up and wrapped his arms around me, not out of fear of losing me, but out of love rediscovered. His embrace was warm, steady, grounding. Not hurried. Not desperate. Just right. We held each other, letting the past fall away, letting the future begin quietly, with tenderness rather than chaos. Later, we sat together under the faint glow of the lantern, leaning into each other's warmth. No words were needed. The bond that had been cracked was no longer breaking, it was healing, thread by thread. And as the power finally flickered back on, illuminating the room with gentle light, it felt symbolic, like a quiet promise that even after darkness, connection can return. The romantic ending wasn't the explosive kind. It was the honest kind. The lasting kind. The kind built on choice. And tonight, we chose each other.